Good morning and welcome to part 2 of the APFIT workshop series. For those of you not on part 1, my name is Devin Bohannon. I've been with the APFIT program since it started. I started as the deputy program manager. I did that for about a year, and then for the last 2 years or so have been serving as the program manager of the APFIT program. So happy to have you all joining us. Part 1 of this series was a deep dive into the program and what we can fund. Today we're shifting into part 2, which is if you think you have a project that it might be eligible for APFIT funding, how do you actually fill out the submission templates to put you on the strongest footing? Erica, we can go to the next slide and dive right in. All right, couple ground rules. You probably saw this if you joined a minute or two early. Just like part 1, just like the workshop last week, mics will be muted. Post your questions in the chat, and then we will record this. It will be posted publicly. We now have a link that you will have access to it. We'll get that posted as quickly as we can. And with that, let's jump into the agenda for today. All right, so I'll walk through just a brief recap of Workshop 1, and then really from there, we'll switch into diving deeper into the selection process. Keep in mind, the selection process for APFIT is government to government, but we want to afford you guys the same ability and understanding that we've given to our government partners, because we know industry is driving a lot of these submissions. Your government partner, even though they'll be the ones hitting submit on these packages, they're going to be relying on you for a lot of the information. So we're going to walk through the same set of slides that we walked through for our government partners, walk through the same selection process that we've provided to them. We're going to walk through all the submission templates. Again, even though they are technically the ones filling them out, we fully expect them to work with you in filling them out. There is actually a new this year, a place where you as the company will have to sign on the letter of attestation stating that you are a small, non-traditional, or you meet the requirements of the NDAA. So I'll actually turn it over to my colleague, Joe Nerlinger. He'll walk through each of the submission templates, give you as much guidance as we possibly can to help strengthen your proposal. Once we get through the templates, we'll talk about some upcoming events, and then that should leave us a decent bit of time for some Q&A at the end. So with that, Erica, let's jump in. A quick recap of Workshop 1. So we spent a lot of time talking about what really matters with APFIT. The stuff you see on the left is pretty typical in any of our briefings or on our website. Went through and highlighted certain parts, boxed certain things, and talked through what really mattered, and ended up with these 6 kind of criteria on the right-hand side of the screen that at the end of the day, this is what makes the best APFIT submission, if you can meet all of these things. And then we kind of talked through, we know not every project is going to actually meet all 6 of these in the perfect way that we want it to do and as part of the APFIT vision. So we spent a lot of time going through, what if you are strong in some areas but weaker in the others? What if you actually don't meet one of these areas? Do you still qualify? And the answer is, it depends. We talked through, we've now had about 6 bins of projects over the last 3.5 years, now that APFIT has been around for 3.5 cycles. I call this current cycle a half cycle because we're in continued resolution. But we talked through each of the categories of projects that we funded in the past to give you an idea of what is the art of the possible with funding. So keeping those 6 areas in mind, Erica, if you go to the next chart, you'll see, obviously, if you meet all 6 of them, if you can say yes to all 6 of them, we call that the perfect fit category. But we know not every project is going to be a perfect fit. We have funded numerous projects in all of the other categories that you see here. So again, if you can't say yes to one of the areas, that doesn't mean you're off the table. We walk through examples of each of the projects in these categories to give you a feel of what we could fund within those categories. And I would say this was probably the big takeaway slide from Workshop 1. Let's see, I just saw a comment that sound is not working. Erica, you can hear me, right? Okay, I got another comment and some thumbs up that people can hear me. Okay, all right. Sounds like that's a one-off. All right. Thanks, Erica. Just making sure. All right, yeah. So this was really the main takeaway from Workshop 1, right? If you can fit into one of these 6 categories, you ought to seriously talk to your government partner, again, because it's not industry submitting directly, but your government partner ought to seriously be considering APFIT, because you are at the point where you are ready for APFIT. And this is really important for industry. I would venture to say, APFIT being a new program, half of your government partners, your government champions, may not even be aware of APFIT. So bringing this knowledge to them, making them aware that there's potentially free money, for lack of a better term, on the table to help continue the momentum that you have behind your capability. Making them aware of that. They'll be the ones submitting the package, but helping them develop that package. So we after this, we talked a little bit about the selection process in what we do with APFIT. And Erica, you can go to the next slide. This slide here is where we really left off workshop 1. This is a pretty high level view of what the selection process looks like. Basically, you have to go through one of these organizations. So when APFIT releases a call for proposals, it's not released out to industry. You're not going to see it on SAM.gov. It's going to go from us at the Office of the Secretary of Defense out to all of these organizations, all of the APFIT submitting organizations. That's every service, every combatant command, numerous agencies and other Department of Defense organizations. So they are the ones looking through their portfolios, trying to figure out which projects are within that APFIT criteria, and they're the ones submitting them to us. So that's step 1. They all actually do a down selection. We limit the number of proposals each of those organizations can submit. It forces them to do that first down selection. The APFIT team will do an initial statutory review, and then we're into rounds of review into the final scoring, where all the final scoring is conducted by these 3 groups: the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Staff, and the services, specifically the service acquisition executives. So that's where we left off workshop 1. Today, we're going to dive deeper into this selection process. And here you can see it spelled out in a little bit more detail. Those stars are the 3 decision gates. So that first decision gate, you have to get through the service or combatant command or agency that is submitting on your behalf. Because we limit the number of submissions they can have, that forces them to do a down selection. They send their top ones to us. So that's that first star. And I'm going to talk more about those organizations. You saw a list in there. We're going to spell all those organizations out. And on the next slide, I'll talk through kind of the strategy of going through one versus the other. But if you get through that, that APFIT submitting organization process, and you make it into their top X number of submissions, it kind of varies each year depending on how much money we expect to have with the APFIT program. Then you make it over to us. So we're in that third arrow area, right? So you're submitted to the OSD APFIT team. We're going to conduct an initial review, and we immediately pull in the rest of the scoring committee, which is made up of OSD, Joint Staff, and the service leads. Depending on how many submissions we get, depending on how much money we expect to have, there's almost always some level of down selection there. We can't invite every proposal that we get into the assessment panel, so that's your second down selection there. If you make it through that, then you get invited to the selection panel. Another really important factor here, it won't be you as the company briefing the selection panel. That is a government-only meeting. So going back to what we reiterated numerous times in workshop 1, the importance of having a good government champion that understands your capability, understands the importance of it, can't be understated, because you're going to be relying on that government champion throughout every step of this process. If they submit to a service, it's important for them to make sure their PEO knows the importance of it, and then make sure the service overall knows the importance of it, so you actually get to the APFIT team. Then they're going to likely be the ones briefing at this assessment panel. I have seen good projects with a government champion that doesn't fully understand the details of the projects, and it really hurts the project. It's critical to get a good government champion, government sponsor, government partner to show up at that briefing and brief all the merits of your project. So you're going to brief at the assessment panel. That assessment panel plays heavily into how the OSD, Joint Staff, and service leads then review and rank those submissions. We use those final rankings of those 3 groups to then develop a 1 to N list, and we fund until we run out of funds. That's that final selection bin. The bottom line here was kind of more relevant for the government folks, but just for your understanding, what happens after we complete final selection is We first do congressional notifications. As soon as those are sent, then we notify your project lead. We actually, at no point, reach out directly to the company. We will notify your project lead, congratulations, you've been selected for APFIT funding, and we'll look to set up immediately, literally the next day if we can, an initial meeting. So this is that second to last box on this whole chart here. We'll want that initial meeting so we can talk through, okay, we need to get the money to you now. What's your contract video going now? How are we going to get that money? We want to get them the money as quickly as possible so they can then turn around, get it on contract with you, or maybe we're sending it directly to the contract, whatever it may be. We move the funding, the project is off and running, and that is our process overall. So Erica, you can go to the next slide. I mentioned these are the organizations that you're going to submit through. And there is a bit of a strategy in picking the right organization. Of course, if you only have, you're only really talking to one government partner and they're in any of these organizations, that's likely who you're going to submit through. But if you've been through a couple experiments or demos at this point, and now you're thinking you've got a combatant command component that's pretty interested in your capability, you've got a service component that seems to be rogering up that they would be the ones to own and sustain it. Here's where the strategy can kind of come into play. If you go in through a service, that pretty much implies to us that service is willing to own and sustain this capability in the out years, which was a key criteria. We'll talk about the criteria on the next slide. So we're not necessarily concerned about the service's view if they're submitting it, right? We're forcing them to down select and only submit their best ones. But if you come in through a service, then we're going to be more interested in, well, how does the warfighter feel about this? And I apologize if I'm getting too deep into Pentagon jargon, but combatant commands are the warfighting component, services are the acquisition component. And if you really understand that dynamic, you probably have a leg up on almost half the people trying to work with the Department of Defense. Really important to understand that dynamic there. So if you are submitting through a service, we're going to be looking at, well, how important is this actually to the warfighter? And we're going to be looking at the joint staff to help us understand that. There's other things you can do to help us get there. And specifically, that's endorsement letters. Joe's going to talk a little bit more about this as we go through the templates, but if you're submitting through a service, an endorsement letter from a PEO doesn't hurt, but it's almost implied, right? The service isn't going to submit it if their PEOs aren't on board with it. However, if you're submitting through a service and you have a combatant command component that fully endorses it at the 06 or 1 or 2 star level, that's really powerful because now you're bridging that gap. You're showing interest on both the service side, the acquisition side, and the combatant command side. Similarly, if you come in through a combatant command, that's your submission pass, that's pretty much implied that the warfighter wants it. An endorsement letter there, again, doesn't hurt. I wouldn't advise it against not doing it if you have the ability to do it, but it's not going to hold as much weight as a service support letter, right? So if you come in through a combatant command and you've got an endorsement from somebody, in the right position at a PEO, now you're hitting both sides of the equation. So when we get to that scoring table and it's the joint staff and the services that we're relying on to review the selection criteria, it makes it hard for us to say no to the project because you're hitting all the marks that we want. For the agencies, this can differ, right? Some of these agencies are focused primarily on the development portion of a project. So there, you're going to want to somehow show us that it's supported by both the service and the warfighter. Other agencies actually own and sustain some of this capability. So in that case, we won't be looking to the service to understand the out-year commitment of the department. We'll actually be looking to that agency itself to understand, have you put in is there a requirement for this? Have you started budgeting for this, or what's your plan to start budgeting for this? Because at the end of the day, that scoring committee is made up of 3 components. You have the Office of the Secretary of Defense component, and we're really going to be looking at your project from how well does it align to the APFIT narrative? Are you truly a small business? Are you really facing the funding gap and we're really accelerating procurement? And are we looking at some good out-year purchases after the APFIT money runs out? The joint staff is the second component of that scoring committee. They're really going to be looking at it from the warfighter perspective. That's what matters most for them. And then the service or SOCOM or CyberCom, we lump SOCOM and CyberCom in with the services given their acquisition authority. We treat them the same way with APFIT. We're looking at them to help us understand, is this realistic that we're going to keep buying it once the APFIT funding runs out? So that right there is pretty much everything I can tell you in how to strengthen your proposal going into the final down selection, hitting the marks on all three of those organizations. And the marks specifically, Erica, if you go to the next slide here, these are our evaluation criteria. We mentioned this in workshop 1. Here you can see the full description and the metrics behind it. But the number 1 criteria being the warfighter impact, that's where we're going to be looking at the joint staff, understanding how important is this to the folks out in the combatant commands that are going to be using it. And then not far behind it, criteria number 2 is the future procurement. So this goes back to the importance of, if you're coming in through a combatant command, you should be really high in the warfighter impact category, but we're really going to want to understand what's the future procurement. That's where that endorsement letter from a PEO, or just an understanding from a PEO, with or without the letter, we're going to be talking to the services. We're ultimately going to be talking to the people at the PEO and understanding, what is your intention for this capability? Do you have any plan to buy more of them in the out years? So, and then that third criteria is the company. This is all about, are you truly a small business that has kind of just recently graduated through the cyber world or whatever development cycle it may be? And is this APFIT award really going to make a big impact to the company? On the other end of that spectrum, it's the non-traditionals that are doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, where the APFIT award may not make a huge impact on the company itself. Those are still legally viable. They're just not going to score as high in this particular category. And then jointness and speed of obligation. Jointness, we kind of talked through this in workshop 1. Almost all the projects we see have some level of jointness, even if it's only one service buying them. Where this becomes a detriment to a project is if you are proposing something that improves workflows for a single service, or something that is so clearly just a service bill, and it's really hard to articulate how that actually benefits any of the other services. Speed of obligation, this is when your government partner brings a project to us, we're going to look at their contracting path. Do they plan on going direct to cyber phase 3? Do they plan on using an OT, a production OT? Whatever the contracting path is, we want to have some understanding, because if all else was equal, all the other categories were equal, and one project was going to be on contract, you guys have the money in your hand in a couple of weeks, and the other one was going to take a year plus, we're going to pick the one that gets the money in your hands faster and the product delivered to the warfighter faster. All right, Erica, we can go to the next slide, because now this is really the bulk of what we're going to talk through today, going through each of the templates, how to fill them out, what you really ought to be focusing on each part of it. So with that, Joe, I think over to you. Are you up on comms?
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay, Devin?
Gotcha.
All right. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Like Devin said, my name is Joe Nerlinger. I serve the APFIT team as a project selection lead, and I'll be walking you through the proposal package here. So starting out with the letter of attestation. This is a one-page document, fairly straightforward, basically meant to gather some high-level information about the company and a POC within your company, and basically have the company attest to whether they are indeed a U.S.-based entity, U.S.-based business, as well as they fall into at least one of those 3 requirement criteria down below. That's a U.S.-based small business, non-traditional defense contractor, and then that third statement there. And so you'll fill this out, and then you'll sign at the bottom, and that's fairly straightforward on the letter of attestation. Slide, please. Next, we'll move into the second part, and this is the largest part of the proposal package. This is the briefing, right? So this is where you get to describe your narrative of what your project is, how it's going to impact the warfighter, and why an APFIT award makes sense for your project. So this first slide that we have here is basically just instructions on what to do, what not to do in the document. We want to keep these as standardized as possible so that leadership has an easy read, but we also want you to tailor the briefing as much as necessary and as much as makes sense in order to tell your true story. So, make sure you're reading through these. I'm not going to bore everyone by reading through each bullet today, but just make sure you're referring back to this slide when filling out the information in the rest of the slides of the briefing. Slide, please. All right, title page here. The only thing I'm going to highlight is, when you're putting together your proposal package or helping the government do so, make sure that you've got good communication with them and you're deciding upon a title for your project, if you don't already have one, that is both brief and descriptive if possible. Understand that if it crosses classifications, then sometimes the names themselves can be classified, but do the best that you can to have a descriptive name. Slide, please. All right, most of the slides, if not all, in this briefing, you can point directly back to the evaluation criteria that Devin reviewed with you. And so this first slide is basically introducing your system as the solution to a proposed problem statement or operational gap, right? So up top there, we ask that you put a statement. What is the problem currently in operations? Or if there's nothing fielded to address this problem, what is that gap? Identify that for us. In the middle there, replace that box with OV1 or something similar that shows us how your system works. Maybe it's interoperable with other systems. We want to know where it lives within the DoD architecture and what functions it's performing. Lastly, down at the bottom, the solution, basically introducing, again, your project as the solution to the statement up above. So, briefly discuss how it's going to be implemented as the solution, and that's going to tee you up for the next slide. Please, Eric. All right, procurement overview. Here, we just ask for a capability description, keep it fairly brief. And then we ask that you break down what APFIT is buying, right? So that APFIT product deliveries, we've got a kind of templated out bullet there for you and table. Please tailor that to your needs. Basically, the information that we want to know here is what is comprised of a quote unquote system. If it's something like a kit, this might include several different subsystems. We just want to see the breakdown of what an actual unit is that APFIT would be purchasing. Slide, please. All right, warfighter impact, right? So going back to that number one evaluation criteria Devin just hit on, we want to know what's the before and after of your system, right? What is the current ConOps, knowing that there is either an operational gap, knowing that the problem statement is clearly in play, and then in the middle there, what is the improved ConOps with the implementation of your system, right? So we've got some ideas there on bullets that we'd like to see that type of information within each section. But again, we want to see how your system moves the needle and improves the warfighter ConOps on the battlefield. Last section down below there, I'll piggyback off of what Devin said. So here you want to place some either brief endorsement quotes or at least a list of organizations that endorses your capability. And kind of like Devin alluded to earlier, if you're a service submission, absolutely highlight a warfighter perspective here with something like a quote. Or if you've got a screenshot or endorsement letter, a snapshot of those, you can include those in the backup slides, which we'll cover in just a bit. Conversely, if you're a CCMD or agency submission, then you're going to want to highlight endorsements from PEOs or program managers here, right? So the organizations that are transitioning your product, your capability into a program of record. Thanks, Erica. All right, so moving along the evaluation criteria here, APFIT impact to the company. So tell us a little bit about yourselves in that first section, and then the APFIT impact. This is what we want to see that's going to give us confidence that you're going to take the APFIT funding amount and you're going to put it to good use in standing up your company so you're more well poised to meet the larger demand for the DoD in out years, right? So think of this as, hey, we're going to take that premium APFIT funding and we're going to build up production lines. We're going to hire more folks, things that you're going to do, again, in order to be on better footing to produce, at scale or at full rate production. Slide, please. Okay, here is that we call it the APFIT alignment. This is more or less the business case that we're looking at here. So top bullet there, you're going to want to provide a backstory, right? Did this system go through RDT&E with the DoD or other organizations? Tell us about that. What other RDT&E type awards, such as Cyber did you receive? And then moving down the slide, identify, again, interest from all the organizations that could potentially transition this product under their auspice. And then we're moving to the right, temporally describe the out-year funding situation, right? So Devin talked earlier about if it's a service submission, we're likely going to see either POMD funding called out, or we're going to see at least a robust plan in order to obtain more procurement funding in out years in order to purchase more of this capability. Looking down at the funding table, this is probably one of the most important things that you'll fill out, or that you and the government sponsor will fill out for the briefing package on the quad chart that we'll brief in just a few minutes. So, we like to see the left tail of RDT&E funding leading up to and not including the year of would-be APFIT award. And then we like to see a gap, right? The so-called valley of death, and I'm sure all of you are aware, a gap in procurement funding between RDT&E and the services picking it up on the back end in out years, right? That's where APFIT, would like to come in, provide our funding. And then, that number, right, that you're proposing, how much you're asking for, it's got to be between $10 and $50 million. There's a little bit of engineering here. You want to pick, a number that makes sense, that correlates to, somewhere around 25% or less is what you want to aim for of the entire DoD need, right? So APFIT doesn't want to be a single-time purchase. We want to, inject our funds so that we get the procurement accelerated. We help your small business not only survive, but thrive through the valley of death. And then when out year dollars show up from either the POM or some other mechanism, again, now you're more well poised to continue that production for large scale purchasing by the DoD. So definitely some gamesmanship with what number you put on that quad chart and on this briefing, and it's something that will likely be discussed with your government sponsor throughout the process. Slide, please. Pretty straightforward here. We ask for milestone delivery schedule up top, and then a breakdown of the unit cost information down below. So understanding that you'll likely be somewhere around the low rate initial production phase, leading into a would-be APFIT award, and then coming out of that, at some point you'll hit full rate production. We want to know, what is that? Is there a degradation in cost per unit? What is that cost savings that, because of the APFIT award, we can say that we're giving to the Air Force or the Army, whatever DoD organization is going to continue procuring your capability in out years. Slide, please. All right, mainly government information here, right? But again, please support them in filling out this table, asking for contracting path and that type of information, as well as the correct POCs, so that if an award is imminent, we can be as prepared as possible to move money as quickly as we can after public announcement. That table down there at the bottom, provide your government folks with how you're breaking down your subcontracting, if that's necessary, right? We want to know where each one of our dollars is going. That way we can ensure that it's going to the right folks. It's going to be used for the right things, and everything's kosher in that respect. Slide, please. All right, arriving here at the backup slides. So provide any additional information here. This is really up to you and up to your government sponsor on what you want to include. Some suggested things are, things like success stories, and that goes hand in hand with those letters of endorsement. So if you've got a screenshot and it's a little bit too long to fit in that warfighter impact slide as a quote, this would be a good spot to put it, right? We don't limit you in the amount of slides that you put in backup. So, feel free to include what you think we need to know that doesn't necessarily fit in the buckets of slides up above, right? So things like detailed use case or mission info, graphics of people using the system. If your system incorporates a very unique type of technology and it begs a little bit of context, please put that in here for us to know, right? Yeah, so do this section as you see fit. So that wraps up the briefing. We'll move into the quad chart, which is basically meant to capture the high level information that's in the briefing, right? So just want to hit on a couple of things here. Again, choose a project title that's descriptive, and you know, the image that you're going to put there in your top left, don't make it an OV1 like it's in the briefing. Here you want to, you know, give us an idea of what the system actually looks like if that's possible, right? A picture of the actual piece of hardware, or you know, some type of diagram of what it looks like and what it does. That little tagline there, you know, if you had to provide one sentence to convince someone that we need this capability, that's your little elevator pitch right there, right? That's your one-liner. Moving down, you know, fill those key participants and key deliverables out as necessary, as well as the sustainment strategy. You know, top right, pretty self-explanatory. It's just kind of a watered-down version of what's already in the briefing. And then again, that funding table, right? So you can see that it's got less fiscal year slots columns in there. You know, edit that table as you see fit. You know, the more information, the better, obviously. And if you have to make a caveat, like, you know, maybe you don't have palmed funding you can point to in out years, but there is a real good plan for it, you know, go ahead and put an asterisk and make us that note below the table, right? Gives us a good feeling for, you know, what we expect to see in the briefing. As for schedule, you know, fill it out just like you did the briefing. And then down below, the program lead, the POC there above the R&E POC in fairly small writing, that's going to be the government lead, right? That's going to be your champion, your government champion, with whom our team is going to work with throughout the selection process, right? So that needs to be that person, not a person from your company. All right, I think that wraps it up, and I'm actually going to hand it back to Devin Bohannon to wrap up the briefing. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, thanks, Joe. All right, so we will wrap up with some of the upcoming events, as I mentioned. So what you're part of now is part 2 of what we'll call Workshop Series 1. This is when we went through the submission package, fairly deep dive. We will wrap up this Workshop Series 1 with an open Q&A. I'll start by talking through some of the common questions we get. May end up recapping a little bit of part 1 and part 2. But the workshop series next week that you either should already have an invite for, or you should be able to go to our website, just Google OSD APFIT. You should be able to register for those workshops. That'll be pretty much an open Q&A, kind of an Ask Me Anything session. That'll finish up Workshop Series 1, and we're calling Workshop Series 1 the series that we ended up running in March. We're going to end up running another one of these series in April. These videos are being posted, but if you have folks that weren't able to join today that you want to join, we'll run the series again. We'll be answering live questions again on all of those. Same structure, part 1 being the deep dive on the program. The real takeaway with part 1 is going to be those 6 categories that APFIT has historically funded and will most likely fund moving forward. Part 2 will be what you just saw today, deep diving into how to actually fill out the templates and put your proposal on the strongest footing. And then we'll wrap up with Q&A. And then a big takeaway here, the FY26 call, we plan on opening that in May. Now, if you've been following the news, there are some changes within the Department of Defense, within the whole of the U.S. government, of course. But as of right now, we plan on opening our call in May. Deadlines will be determined by the organizations that we send the call to. Again, there is no direct submission from industry. So if you're submitting through the Army, let's say, your government person, your government champion needs to be in tune with the Army internal deadlines. We will help facilitate that. Your Army POC, you can put your Army POC in touch with us. You are obviously already in touch with us by virtue of being on this meeting. You can directly connect us with your Army POC. They can send osd.apfit@mail.mil an invite or an email inquiry. So numbers of ways, but it's going to be important that your government partner understands the internal deadlines of the organization they plan on submitting through. So that's all going to open up in May. And then from here on, I think we can go into some Q&A. Erica, you can go one more slide. I think we just got a quick summary of today.